Discover the amazing moment when a lonely CEO transforms a little girl's life with dance. Jake Thompson, the newly minted tech CEO, stood on the 42nd floor of his skyscraper, enveloped by a sea of glass and steel. Accolades hung in frames on the walls, yet they felt hollow. His life, filled with metrics and milestones, resonated with an unsettling silence that echoed his own loneliness. He was the king of the corporate world, ruling over a kingdom of numbers, yet beneath the surface of his success lay a barren landscape of estrangement and isolation. The few friendships he had slipped away, leaving in their wake only the ghostly memories of laughter and connection. His sister, once a warm presence in his life, had grown distant, choosing to cut ties rather than endure his relentless ambition. After another sterile board meeting, where profit margins overshadowed the very essence of humanity, Jake stepped out into the brisk autumn air. He drifted into a small park nearby, seeking refuge from his own suffocating reality. Sitting on a weathered bench, he buried himself in spreadsheets on his tablet, the numbers dancing before his eyes like the frigid winds outside. Suddenly, a burst of color swirled through his peripheral vision. A little girl, no more than 8, twirling on cracked pavement. Mia, with her infectious smile, captivated him. Despite the threads of poverty that wove through her neighborhood, she danced as if the world belonged to her, her joy in electric contrast to the gray surroundings. In that instant, Jake felt a flicker of warmth light within him. "Can you dance like that?" he pondered, almost aloud, but the thought sent him spiraling into a deeper reflection. He wanted to reach out, yet his own burdens loomed heavier than the autumn clouds. He felt like a fraud, witnessing such unfiltered happiness while grappling with a soul mired in corporate cynicism. Regardless, his heart surged with a longing that felt foreign, a desire to connect, to escape this desolation. If he could just help her somehow, distract from his own pain. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the days passed, Jake began offering to teach Mia. They practiced late into the night, her cramped living room filled with families and the aroma of home-cooked meals. Each laugh, each shared moment chipped away at his frigid shell, exposing a deep-seated yearning he thought he had buried with ambition. But the darkness of his corporate world loomed closer. A scandal burgeoning within his company threatened everything he had built and touched all of them. As the days to the showcase dwindled, Jake found himself torn between the growing connection with Mia and the urgent need to salvage his crumbling reputation. In those moments, the weight of his dilemma grew unbearable. Invest in Mia's dreams at the cost of his own, or preserve his identity as a successful CEO amidst the chaos? The stakes felt amorphous, whispering doubts that crept into his thoughts like weeds. His heart raced at the thought of losing her, yet each neglectful glance at his phone reminded him of the ticking clock on his professional career. They had each faced their own battles, but now, forces beyond their control threatened to divide their worlds irrevocably. As they stood on the precipice of their performance, fear coiled tightly in his stomach, each beat amplifying the urgency of the moment. Would they break free together, or would he only add to her burden? The days leading up to the showcase blurred together like the frantic strokes of a painter overwhelmed by a choice of colors. Each moment spent with Mia balanced delicately against the backdrop of Jake's corporate turmoil. Her laughter was a stark contrast to the whispered rumors and rising tensions within his company, yet each joyful twirl reminded him of a simplicity he had long abandoned. It was almost intoxicating, this connection he forged while the walls of his glass tower closed in tighter, reminding him of the stakes. Jake could feel the fatigue in his bones as he transitioned from the vibrant dance sessions to urgent calls with his board members. There, in those sterile, monochrome meetings, he was still the sharp, decisive CEO, yet the conviction behind his decisions began wavering. He no longer felt fully aligned with their ambitious, profit-driven goals. The passion he had once held for innovation paled against the flickering hope he saw in Mia's eyes. In stark contrast to the board's cutthroat strategies, Mia embodied a purity of spirit that challenged his fundamental values. One evening, after a particularly grueling phone call that had nearly shattered his patience, he found himself in the dim glow of her living room. It was cluttered yet spirited. Posters of dancers adorned the walls, and the remnants of dinner lingered in the air. Mia was practicing a pirouette when he arrived, an expression of concentration etched on her delicate features. "Jake, watch!" she called, spinning with a grace that belied her circumstances. It was infectious. For a moment, the heaviness of impending disaster at work faded. He clapped, feeling the warmth spread through him, yet soon it was replaced by a gnawing anxiety. As she finished her turn and tumbled into a fit of giggles, the image of his corporate reality loomed back into focus. He realized that he had been feeding off this joy, using it like an instrument to mask his impending failure. But was it fair to Mia to draw from her light while his own shadow threatened to consume them both? The night of the showcase arrived with all its bright lights and pulsating energy, a stark contrast to his quiet evenings in Mia's living room. As they stood backstage, waiting for their moment to step into the spotlight, Jake's heart hammered in his chest. He saw in Mia's eyes the innocence of hope, a hope that he might become someone worthy of her trust, someone who could uplift her world. Yet the suffocating weight of his current crisis loomed large, like an anvil about to crash down and shatter their fragile connection. Would the corporate scandal erupt with enough force to ruin the newfound bond they had cultivated? The thought spiraled in his mind, tightening the noose of anxiety around his throat. "Jake?" Mia's voice pulled him from the depths of his internal turmoil. They were next. "Yeah?" He forced a smile, but the urgency in her eyes belied his facade. "Dance with me," she whispered, extending her hand. Just then, the curtain began to lift. He took her small hand in his, and for that heart-stopping moment, he felt a surge of bravery. Yet, as they stepped into the blinding lights, dread settled back within him. What if everything collapsed in this moment? Was he ready to face not just the judgment from the audience but also the reckoning waiting in his boardroom? As they positioned themselves, he confronted his deepest fear head-on. Could he salvage the remnants of his life while giving Mia the chance she deserved? The moment stretched an intersection where their dreams and fears could either collide or ignite something extraordinary, and he realized, deep within, this performance could very well dictate not just their fates, but where the power truly lay, in choices made, in risks taken, in love acknowledged. As the music began to swell, every heartbeat reverberated in his chest, with one thought dominating: this was only the beginning. What would it take to fully embrace this new path? As the first notes of music enveloped them, Jake felt as if the world outside evaporated. The chaos of his corporate life, the looming scandal and harsh boardroom decisions, faded into nothingness under the suffocating brilliance of the stage lights. He glanced at Mia. Her enthusiasm shone brightly, reflective of a spirit untainted by the stresses he faced. In that split second, she transformed into his anchor, reminding him why he had agreed to step outside his comfort zone. As they began to move, every turn and step connected him to her. He felt different, lighter, more alive. The choreography became an extension of their bond, a conversation that defied words, filled with unspoken promises and dreams. Each leap illuminated the growing realization of what this moment could mean not just for them, but for Jake's future. For the first time in ages, Jake allowed himself to simply be, to exist within the music without the constraints of expectation or judgment. However, shadows of his corporate life didn't disappear entirely. The heavy gnawing in his gut tugged at him, reminding him that this joy was precarious. As the dance climaxed, they concluded with a pirouette that united them in a stunning finish. Applause thundered through the auditorium, but Jake's mind remained turbulent. He gripped Mia's hand tightly, not wanting to let go. In that moment, clear as day, he faced an uncomfortable truth: he couldn't return to his old self. The joy of this experience clashed brutally with the reality waiting for him after they left the stage. Mia's innocent laughter snapped him back from his brooding thoughts. She was radiant with accomplishment, and he felt warmth in her gaze as if she believed in him, even when he faltered in believing it himself. The enormity of his choices seeped back in, the choices that molded him into a person he now questioned. The dance had been liberating, yet it served only to amplify the discord within him. "Did you see how they loved it?" she chirped, attempting to catch her breath. Her exuberance was infectious, but a deep sense of urgency weighed heavily on Jake's heart. He understood that behind the applause lay an unrelenting storm at work, casting long shadows over everything he cherished. As they left the stage, the tension coiled tighter. His phone buzzed relentlessly, reminders of a world where everything he cherished was at stake. He stole a look at Mia, the bright-eyed dancer who had revived parts of him he thought long buried. Perhaps the connection they shared could be the catalyst for change, a beacon through this chaos. Jake returned to the green room, where nervous executives were poised over reports detailing corporate fallout. He felt their anxiety, but for the first time, it didn't consume him. Instead of diving into the rationality of business decisions, he took a moment. It was a small yet significant shift. What if he could carve out a path that didn't pivot solely around profitability? He glanced at Mia, who was still glowing with the performance, and a fierce determination ignited within him. It wasn't just about corporate goals, it was about authenticity. To strip away pretense and re-engage with the purpose that had once driven him. But could such a transformation unfold under the scrutiny of the board? As the reality of his choices flashed before him, could he risk everything he'd built on a new vision? The stakes might be too high, but he recognized a critical truth: he wouldn't just be choosing for himself anymore. His heart raced at the thought of not just changing a company but shaping a brighter future where Mia's dreams could thrive alongside his own. He exhaled slowly, grappling with the enormity of this new direction he felt compelled to chase. The moment felt pivotal. And then, as his mind swirled with visions of what could be, he whispered to himself, the time had come to face not just the boardroom, but the truth I'd been avoiding. What would happen when he finally confronted the powers that be with an unyielding resolve for change? Jake stood in the green room, the echoes of applause still ringing in his ears, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere filled with hushed whispers and furrowed brows. As he took a deep breath, he realized that he had a choice to make, one that could redefine not just his place in the corporate hierarchy, but his very identity. The euphoria from the performance had infused him with a determination that felt foreign yet exhilarating. He glanced around at the familiar faces of the executives, each clutching their phones as though their lives depended on the latest updates regarding stock prices and policy changes. But something was different for Jake. He no longer wanted to be part of the anxiety that suffocated creativity. He wanted authenticity. The very word reverberated in his mind like a mantra, urging him to break free. It was time to step up or step aside. Jake, a voice cut through his reverie. It was Mark, his right-hand man, wearing a look of concern. We need you to review the contingency plans. The board is anxious, and I know, Jake interrupted, his tone firmer than he intended. He could almost see the gears turning in Mark's head, calculating how this uncharacteristically assertive behavior could affect their strategy. Have you considered what might happen if we shift our focus? If we prioritize innovation over profits? Jake surprised even himself with the words. They lingered in the air, laden with the weight of possibilities. Are you serious? Mark asked, half skeptical, half incredulous. Absolutely. Jake's heart raced at the conviction in his own voice. It was as if unveiling this vision had unlocked a reservoir of potential within him that had been sealed for far too long. The mere thought of pouring passion into a project rather than cold numbers sent adrenaline coursing through his veins. He thought of Mia, her laughter and joy radiating from the stage. She wasn't just a dancer, she was a reminder of the essence of creativity, of purpose beyond profit margins. It was a world where people mattered more than products, where dreams weren't suffocated by corporate policies. With newfound resolve, Jake turned back to the executives. Let us convene the team. We need a brainstorming session to explore pathways toward radically redefining our approach. I want to hear fresh ideas, ways we can innovate fearlessly. If we're going to steer through this storm, we must do it with authenticity, or we'll drown. Silence ensued for a moment, and then a ripple of surprise washed over the room. Was he truly prepared to take this leap? As discussions began, he felt empowered, igniting a spark in the others. They shared ideas ranging from vibrant marketing campaigns that conveyed genuine stories to potential collaborations with local artists, efforts that could return them to their roots and redefine the company's purpose. But alongside that thrill came trepidation. Could his board tolerate changes that veered from their tried and true, rigid business models? Doubt lingered like a shadow, whispering in his ear that monumental shifts often led to pushback. He looked around at the engagement illuminating the faces in the room, and for the first time in ages, hope surged within him. This was no longer just about salvaging a faltering company, it was about reigniting a vision that brought people together, employees, customers, and even his burgeoning relationship with Mia. But then, as the meeting progressed toward actionable plans, a notification popped up on his phone, an invitation to an emergency board meeting scheduled for later that afternoon. A knot twisted in his stomach. He had been expecting it, but not like this. The stakes had just doubled. Jake glanced at Mark, who raised an eyebrow, as if reading his thoughts. There would be opposition, no doubt, and the question lingered in the air: would he have the courage to defend this new vision in the crucible of scrutiny? Determination enveloped him. He would fight for change, but the deeper truth remained. The board would not only challenge his plans. They would challenge him, his values, his growth, and ultimately, the man he aspired to be. The atmosphere crackled with tension as he felt the defining moment nearing, the intersection of corporate reality and personal conviction. Could he champion authenticity and withstand the inevitable pushback from his own peers? Jake took one final, steadied breath as he prepared to confront the looming reality. This time, it was not just a battle for the company, it was a battle for his soul. And as he stepped forward, the stakes could not have been clearer. What would ultimately emerge? He wondered, his newfound vision or the weight of the old guard? As the emergency board meeting approached, Jake felt the weight of his resolve intensify. Moments earlier, he was inspired and invigorated, but now a suffocating tide of anxiety threatened to sweep him back into the familiar currents of doubt. Would he muster the courage to advocate for authenticity in an environment molded by skepticism? His mind raced through potential outcomes, paint a vivid image of every conceivable reaction from his expectant peers to I. In the brief moments he spent preparing, Jake sat hunched over his notes, scribbling key points he hoped could counteract the board's inevitable concerns. Innovation is key, he wrote in bold letters, underlining each word twice. Each mark made felt like a battle cry, but with every stroke of the pen, the attractive naivety of his newfound dreams was met by the hard reality of corporate trepidation. Was he genuinely ready to disrupt the very values that had kept the company afloat for years? The doors swung open, and the board members filed in, their expressions secretive, seasoned with skepticism and wariness. The atmosphere crackled with the tension of anticipation. With every step Jake took to the front of the room, resolute yet cautious, he could feel the stares weighing him down. It was time to flip the script. "Thank you all for coming," Jake began, striving for a confidence he didn't yet fully possess. "Today, I want to share a vision that moves beyond our financial metrics, the vision of a company that prioritizes innovation and creativity." His voice held an assertiveness that surprised even him, but it also revealed his inner conflict. As he outlined his ideas, weaving through concepts of creative collaboration and storytelling, he caught glimpses of disapproval etched on the board's faces, exchanges of glances, furrowed brows, crossed arms. Each expression magnified his unease, igniting the hesitance that had loomed earlier. Yet, there was a flicker inside him, a burgeoning belief that what he was proposing was not merely aspirational but essential. When he reached the segment emphasizing collaboration with local artists, one board member interjected, "Jake, with all due respect, this sounds risky. Our primary focus has always been profits, and while innovation is admirable, we can't afford to alienate our existing customer base." The words struck him like a punch to the gut. Would they never understand? It wasn't about discarding profitability, but about harmonizing with the authentic stories of the people they served. Jake steadied himself, ready to confront the challenge head-on. "If we don't take risks, aren't we simply resigning ourselves to mediocrity?" he countered, voice steady. "Our audience craves authenticity, a connection, not just transactions. In fact, it's those connections that build loyalty and drive long-term growth." Each sentence shifted the dynamics. The small flickers of intrigue began to emerge among his peers, opening a window he was determined to widen. For the next hour, as discussions evolved, he presented data illustrating how storytelling had transformed the success of other companies. He guided the conversation with a mix of passion and analytical reasoning, igniting a spark of curiosity that he sensed growing in the room. There would still be battles to face, but the clearance of the fog felt palpable. His vision was taking root. As the meeting concluded, Jake couldn't help but notice a subtle shift in some board members. Perhaps the weight of tradition was not impenetrable. Perhaps there was room for growth, space for his burgeoning leadership. But deep within, uncertainty simmered. What if the board ultimately rejected his ideas? Would he shrink back into compliance? These thoughts haunted him as he exited, but a sliver of determination glimmered in the back of his mind. Outside, he spotted Mia across the lot, her lively energy embodying everything he longed for his company to embrace. It felt as if she breathed life into the ambition he aspired to realize. With every step toward her, the thrill of possibility coursed through his veins, yet mingled with hesitation. Did he have the strength to bring his passion for authenticity into the corporate battlefield again? With the image of Mia's spirited gaze driving him forward, he couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead in this pursuit for authenticity in a world so entrenched in convention. The confrontation he had faced today was only the beginning. The true test awaited on the horizon, and he would have to unearth depths within himself he had yet to explore. Would he rise to the occasion again? The path he would choose next could change everything. Jake's heart raced as he crossed the distance to Mia. Her enthusiasm felt like a lifeline. Yet, that same thrill was quickly tempered by the gnawing anxiety of what lay ahead, both for the company and for himself. What had begun as a moment of inspiration now felt riddled with uncertainty. He had planted seeds of change at the board meeting, but could they truly grow in an environment that thrived on predictability? Mia! He called, his voice betraying a mix of excitement and tension. She turned, her face lighting up instantly as if she could feel the electric energy sparking between them. "Hey! How did it go?" she asked, her eyes wide with anticipation. Jake hesitated, processing the weight of his truths. "It was a mixed bag. I introduced some ideas about authenticity and community engagement," but he paused, the shadow of doubt clawing back at him. "I'm not sure they're ready for it." Mia stepped closer, her expression softening. "But you spoke up. That's a big step. A lot of people would have played it safe." "Yeah, but what if it was all for nothing? What if they reject everything I proposed?" He slumped against the car, feeling more vulnerable than he had moments ago. "It's never for nothing. You challenged the status quo." "That takes guts," she said, her tone resolute. "Change starts with someone willing to stand up and say there's another way." Jake absorbed her words, a glimmer of possibility flickering back to life. Yet he still felt torn. The allure of merging his vision with the company's risk-averse mentality was tempting, but was that truly the path to meaningful innovation? "Mia, I want to disrupt, to bring authenticity to our approach. But what if the board sees it as a threat? Then you keep pushing forward. You don't have to convince everyone all at once. Start small," she encouraged, gaze unwavering. "Invite them into the process instead of just presenting ideas. Collaboration doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing deal." That idea simmered in his mind. Perhaps if he framed his proposals not as radical changes, but as opportunities for collaboration, the board might be more receptive. "You're right," he said, warming to the thought. "It could lead to more innovative outcomes, and they may feel part of a solution instead of facing an upheaval." Mia's smile widened. "Exactly. People respond better when they feel included, not threatened. Try hosting some brainstorming sessions where they can voice their ideas. That way, they'll embrace the change rather than resist it." He ran his fingers through his hair, that exhilarating mix of dread and excitement swirling within him. Accepting Mia's advice meant diving deeper into the uncertainties of leadership, but perhaps she was right. True innovation required fostering a sense of unity and passion among the team rather than forging a path alone. Before he could ruminate any further, a notification ping broke through his focus. It was an email from the board. The subject, follow-up on today's discussion. His breath caught as he opened it, heart pounding. The brief message indicated they were intrigued by his ideas and wanted to discuss them further. His pulse quickened. There was a chance he could foster that change, subtly weaving in his vision while allowing room for their input. Suddenly, an unexpected weight lifted from his shoulders. He felt invigorated, ready for the next step. "I think I need to set up a follow-up session. Get everyone involved in this process. It could be the opening I need," he said, excitement bubbling in his voice. "Yes. That's the spirit." Mia beamed at him, and in that moment, Jake felt solid ground beneath his feet again, but as he plotted his next moves, doubt crept in again. What if he misstepped? What if his vision didn't align as he hoped? With the realities of navigating the board's concerns in mind, Jake realized he was on the brink of redefining not only his role but his own identity as a leader. He had to transition from a solitary dreamer to a unifying force. Determined, he texted Mia while she radiated encouragement. Could he really merge his authenticity with a collaborative mindset? Was he equipped to shape a new narrative within the confines of corporate skepticism? The moment of decision felt striking, a pivot he hadn't anticipated. The board posed challenges like shadowy giants, yet inside him, creativity sparked a path forward. With the finality of the email lingering in his head, Jake took a deep breath, ready to tackle the next challenge. Change beckoned him, and excusing himself from the grip of self-doubt was his only option, but the game was still on, and the next chapter wasn't just about him, it was about a collective journey that involved breaking down barriers. Would he have the courage to navigate this dynamic world where every interaction held the potential for transformation? The stage was set, and now he felt the true conflict awaited: the opportunity to inspire or the risk of falling back into silence. As Jake sat in front of his laptop, screen illuminated in the dim light, he could feel the familiar tension knotting in his stomach again. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, the prospect of crafting a proposal for the follow-up session daunting yet exhilarating. How could he transform this initial flicker of interest from the board into a full-blown commitment to change? The email had hinted at curiosity, but curiosity could easily dissipate into skepticism if he wasn't careful. He briefly considered a traditional approach: charts and statistics, all meticulously laid out. But something stirred within him, a deep recognition that the current moment required more than mere numbers. This wasn't just about convincing the board, it was about igniting their passions and drawing them into a shared vision. Jake pushed aside the laptop, getting up to pace the small, cluttered office. The walls around him echoed with echoes of past decisions, each representing the confines of a corporate culture that had for too long prioritized safety over innovation. What if he invited them into a story instead? What if he shared not just the what and how, but the deeper why behind his vision? It clicked: a personal narrative anchored in authenticity. He could already imagine the faces of the board members during his presentation, some skeptical, others indifferent. But what if he presented his ideas through a lens that highlighted community and engagement? What if they could see these concepts not just as shifts within a company, but as a shared journey toward genuine growth? Feeling the surge of determination, he returned to his desk. He'd start with an outline, capturing the essence of each concept to elicit their participation. A brainstorming session would allow their views to merge with his, creating a tapestry of ideas instead of a solitary thread. The challenge ahead might still be great, but this felt like a constructive approach against the odds that once seemed insurmountable. As he typed, memories of Mia's encouragement surged in him. "You invited them in," he murmured to himself, the phrase resonating with the confidence he sought to embody. Imagining the potential vibrancy of an engaged board, voices mingling in creativity rather than conflict, fueled his resolve. Suddenly, this wasn't merely a task, it was an opportunity to transform the narrative around leadership within the company. Jake's fingers flew over the keyboard, crafting a presentation filled not just with statistics but also stories, instances where collaboration had spurred unexpected breakthroughs. He would draw parallels between his vision and moments from his life. Moments that had sparked change reflected in the way he and Mia had worked together. But then doubt crept in again. Was he overreaching? Was it too bold to assume they would embrace his narrative? Suddenly, the self-doubt began to churn again, a cold reminder that the familiar territory of uncertainty was looming. It felt all too possible that the very narrative he hoped to construct might instead serve as another wall keeping him isolated. The thought was unsettling, but Jake resisted the impulse to retreat. He needed to succeed where others failed, where he had failed before. This process wasn't merely about presenting ideas, it was about fostering a culture of trust, where each voice matters, including his. The technical side and the emotional side of leadership must converge, and this meeting could be the crucible for that convergence. With newfound clarity, he set a date for the brainstorming session and sent out invitations to the board, reminding himself that he wasn't just a lone figure in a boardroom, he was developing into a facilitator of change and agent of collaboration. But as he prepared to take this next step, the questions loomed larger: could he withstand the pressures? What if dissent clouded the session, undermining his hopeful vision? Jake closed the laptop, his heart racing again with consideration for the next challenge ahead. The stakes felt higher now. No longer was he merely challenging his own perceptions, he was set to invite others to join him in a potentially transformative process. Would he summon the strength to unite differing opinions into a cohesive vision? As he reflected, the time had come not to face just the challenges of a boardroom, but the complexities of human interaction, where each conversation contained the potential for profound alteration. The short distance between doubt and belief seemed daunting, yet Jake felt himself on the precipice of something grander, a moment where collective fears could yield shared aspirations. With challenges looming, only time would tell if he could catalyze the change he envisioned, but one truth rang clear: the moment of reckoning was here, and he could no longer afford silence. Would the board embrace his call for unity, or would he once again find himself standing alone? Jake awoke the next morning, an uneasy blend of anticipation and dread swirling within him. The sunlight slicing through the blinds illuminated the papers strewn across his table, his plans for the brainstorming session staring back at him. It was a reminder of the weight he carried, not just in developing a proposal, but in redefining the very essence of leadership within the company. He dressed carefully, focusing on his attire as a reflection of the commitment he was about to embody. The crispness of his shirt offered a brief sense of control amidst the storm brewing inside him. Each step toward the office felt heavy, like a countdown to an imminent confrontation. As Jake entered the boardroom, he surveyed the faces around the table, each a mirror reflecting shades of skepticism, boredom, and rare intrigue. The atmosphere dripped with the reluctance to embrace change, and yet, he was here to challenge that reluctance. He paused, taking a deep breath that anchored him firmly in the present. "You all received my outline," Jake began, allowing his voice to carry the calm conviction he sought to project. The murmurs around the table quickly faded into an attentive silence. "Today, I want to invite you into a different kind of conversation." He shared stories, anecdotes from his career and personal life where innovation had risen out of healthy discourse. He spoke of a time in his early career when he had let fear stifle an idea until a colleague had challenged him to share it. Addressing the board, he noted how that moment felt like stepping into the light after years of shadows. However, he noticed one board member, Sarah, her arms crossed tightly, reacting with palpable skepticism. Her presence hung like a weight, and he questioned if he would allow one person's doubt to extinguish the spark he was trying to ignite. Yet, here lay a test: rather than shy away from it, could he engage with her resistance? "Sarah," Jake said, meeting her eyes, "I sense your hesitance. Can you share your thoughts? What concerns you about a shift in our approach?" Her expression shifted slightly, surprise flickering across her face. "I worry about the risk we take. Innovation often leads to uncertainty. What if it fails?" Jake felt the challenge weave into the fabric of the conversation. What if it doesn't? What if we cultivate a space where failure isn't feared but embraced as part of the journey? Together, we can shape a roadmap that allows calculated risks. Your experience could steer us away from pitfalls we can't foresee. This was the pivotal moment Jake had been anticipating. He needed to connect, not just respond. If he remained anchored in vulnerability while confronting dissent, he could demonstrate the essence of his vision: collaboration, not confrontation. The room throbbed with a new energy as others began to engage, voicing fears and thoughts alike. Jake felt a shift. Different perspectives entwined, illuminating various facets of potential. Laughter floated around the table as jokes punctuated serious discussions. The narrative was morphing from one of skepticism to the shared venture of possibility, each board member innately contributing to something greater. Yet, amidst the engagement, Jake felt his self-doubt pulse beneath the surface like an unrelenting current. Was the shift genuine, or merely a fleeting moment? As discussions intensified, each positive reaction created ripples of hope, yet traces of anxiety tugged at his consciousness, reminding him of the fragility of a breakthrough moment. As the session drew to a close, the board began drafting action steps, their voices overlapping in excitement. But Jake didn't feel victorious yet. The shadows of doubt lingered, gnawing at him. He respected each participant, and the thought of disappointing them terrified him. He stood, heart racing against the crescendo of discussion. "Thank you all for embracing this dialogue. But I need to share something vital. Changing our culture takes courage, and that courage begins from within. Each of us must take ownership of this transformation. I can't bear this burden alone. Are we ready to see this through together? As their responses met him with a mix of nods and hesitant smiles, Jake took another breath, buoyed by the prospect of evolving relationships, but what he didn't know was that Sarah, the skeptic, had her own unrest simmering beneath the surface, one that would revisit him sooner than he anticipated, a confrontation that could either cement their progress or unravel the fragile threads of trust they had begun to weave. Jake left the boardroom, his mind buzzing with the echoes of conversation still reverberating in his ears. The energy of the meeting had felt almost electric, yet beneath the surface, he wrestled with questions that gnawed at his resolve. Had he truly made a difference, or was it all just a temporary distraction from the inevitable resistance that could still come? Walking through the corridors of the office, Jake's gaze drifted to the windows blurring past. The skyline was a jagged reminder of both ambition and fragility, a dichotomy that mirrored his internal turmoil. He couldn't shake the feeling of being at a precipice. The direction of the company and possibly his career teetered on the edge of a profound transformation. As he returned to his desk, a shadow fell across the doorway. It was Sarah. Her arms were still crossed, fingers gripping her elbows tightly, as though she were warding off something malevolent. The challenge she represented lingered in the air, a constant reminder that not everyone was ready to embrace change. "Jake," she began, her tone clipped, but not unfriendly. "Can we talk?" He nodded, gesturing for her to sit. Jake's pulse quickened. It was time for an honest confrontation. He braced for the weight of her skepticism, already anticipating the pushback. "You made some valid points in there," she continued, "but I worry that we are encouraging people to embrace failure without offering them a safety net. What happens when someone risks everything and falls flat? Their morale will plummet, and so will the project. We're not a startup. We're a company with a reputation at stake." Jake steeled himself. "You're right, Sarah. But isn't it equally important that we foster an environment where creativity can flourish? I don't want to promote recklessness but rather calculated risks." "That discussion we had was the first step." "I thought for many, it may not be enough," she interrupted. "Leadership is about guiding people through uncertainty, not just inviting them to take leaps. You need to understand their fears if you want them to follow where you lead." Her words landed hard, and a sliver of irritation flared in him. Did she truly think he was dismissive of his team's fears? He took a breath, recalling the conversations just shared, each voice contributing to a compelling narrative. Perhaps he was dismissing something crucial, something that called for deeper introspection. "Maybe you're right," he conceded, allowing vulnerability to infiltrate his voice. "But what would you propose as a necessary safety net? How do we ensure they have the space to take those leaps, while also providing them the reassurance they need?" Sarah uncrossed her arms, leaning in as her expression softened, revealing a flicker of empathy. "We need to structure our approach to innovation. A framework that allows for gradual experimentation and mentorship. Let people pilot smaller projects instead of giant leaps into the unknown. Failure can still happen, but at a manageable level." Jake felt a shift, a dawning realization that perhaps Sarah's skepticism wasn't just a barrier, it could be a guiding force. It was a call for structure, and if he could harness that feedback, they could pilot a culture shift that actually thrived on transparency and teamwork. "Let us create a plan," Jake proposed, his own enthusiasm igniting once more. "We can outline pilot programs that allow calculated risks while nurturing support for those involved. Would you feel comfortable spearheading that initiative?" The flicker of surprise crossed her features before she nodded slowly, the tension in her posture releasing. "I can do that, but it'll take time, and we must involve others in this process." With agreement reached, they began to draft potential outlines for ways forward. The conversation evolved from one of conflict to collaboration, Jake realizing the immense power that lay in embracing differing perspectives. He left the office that evening with a renewed sense of purpose. Yet, just as his uncertainty began to subside, he stumbled upon an unexpected message from the upper management team. In the pit of his stomach, a new wave of apprehension surged. They were calling for an emergency check-in meeting to discuss the new direction. The time had come to face the consequences of their brainstorming, the true tipping point of their efforts. Would their initiation take root, or would he now have to navigate the fallout? Jake stood before the polished conference table, heart hammering in his chest as the members of upper management filed in. The room was charged with an undercurrent of expectation, every gaze assessing the firmament of change he had begun to weave. Today, in this binding moment, he would need to solidify the transformation he sought not only for the company's corporate ethos but also for the very definition of what it meant to be a leader himself. As the meeting commenced, Jake felt the weight of his journey encapsulate him. He took a deep breath, recalling the vibrant laughter of Mia as they danced. The joy she radiated had reignited his own spirit for innovation and community. They had stood together on the precipice, and now it was time for Jake to forge ahead solo. "Good afternoon," he began, voice steadier than he felt. "We're at a turning point, and I'm excited to share the progress we've made through recent brainstorming sessions. Instead of merely chasing metrics, we must embrace storytelling. It's about creating genuine connections with our audience." He felt the eyes upon him, skepticism mixed with intrigue dancing across their faces. As he outlined the new direction, a blend of calculated risks and community-driven innovation, Jake felt a budding confidence blossom. We've discussed ways to pilot smaller projects that empower our teams while providing the safety net needed to foster creativity. He looked around, gauging the pulse in the room. To his relief, the atmosphere felt less like an inquisition and more like a doorway to renewed possibilities. Yet, just as he began to feel momentum on his side, an opposing voice broke through. "Jake, with all due respect," chimed in Edward, a tenured executive, arms crossed defiantly across his chest. "These ideas are ambitious, and while ambition is commendable, how do you plan to sustain profitability while taking these so-called calculated risks? It's a slippery slope." Jake felt a familiar surge of apprehension settle deep within him, echoes of doubt rising like phantoms from the past. However, purpose masked his hesitance. "Edward, I appreciate your concerns. But fostering a culture of innovation isn't just about profitability, it's about cultivating loyalty that leads to sustainable growth. When our employees feel valued and are allowed to experiment, this will naturally resonate with our customers. They'll want to engage with a brand that prioritizes authenticity." The murmurs around the table hinted at a shift. Perhaps the tide was turning. Another voice, Sarah's, joined in. "Jake makes a valid point. We see how storytelling in marketing has drawn audiences closer to brands. There could be potential here, but we should outline success metrics for this new direction. We need to quantify this shift." After a moment of contemplative silence, Jake offered a nod. "Absolutely. We can develop specific KPIs that capture both engagement and profitability, monitoring our progress closely." As discussions deepened, Jake felt a surge within him, an empowerment that surged through every word he articulated. He was no longer navigating corporate life as a lonely CEO but engaging deeply with a community of leaders who were starting to see the vision, yet doubt still flickered like a distant star. Could they truly embrace this new narrative? As the conversation unfolded, and teams cautiously discussed implementation strategies, Jake felt the apprehension changing to excitement, a shared vision beginning to align. Emerging from the meeting, Jake experienced a palpable shift inside him. He had taken a leap and, in doing so, recognized that vulnerability could fuel strength. He was not the solitary figure he once believed himself to be. He found community even within a corporate structure. Mia's spirit of determination resurfaced in his thoughts. He couldn't help but think of her dance. The way each step was a leap into vulnerability that could lead to beauty. Engaging with the board had mirrored that performance, a choreography of shared dreams unfolding in real time over the course of his meetings. Jake reached for his phone, eager to share this milestone with Mia. Texting her, he felt exhilarated. Finally, he was aligning his identity as a leader with the values he had rediscovered through their connection. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the skyscrapers, Jake stood proudly atop his building, gazing across the horizon. Each lit window represented stories waiting to be engaged. He had transformed from a lonely executive into a visionary leader, a man who believed that genuine connections were the key to innovative futures. With renewed purpose, Jake felt the weight of loneliness lift. He had conquered self-doubt, had proven that embracing authenticity not only emboldened his ethos but also symbolized the committee he had dared to dream with. Drained yet fulfilled, Jake stepped inside and made a silent commitment he would continue to champion change and cultivate an environment thriving in vulnerability. With that thought, he knew he could redefine what it meant to lead one small step, one joyful dance at a time. The journey had just begun, and he couldn't wait to share it. Now, as you reach the end of Jake's transformative journey, you need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like right now to feed the algorithm. Comment below your thoughts on Jake's evolution and what you believe comes next for him. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions.